on Saturday, I did some flotation therapy and infrared sauna with my one of my dearest friends, and I had like a mind blowing experience in the tank.
Hmm.
Um, changing my guides. I got some new guides.
Oh, I love when that happens.
Yeah, I got some new guides, and it's interesting. I guess maybe it does relate to this a little bit because I had been talking to, I don't know who I was talking to about gender identity and sexuality and like the fluidity of sexuality and like divine feminine and masculine. And you see a lot of people sort of talking about not wanting to use those words and using sonar and
Right.
lunar, which I agree with, a lot. And also, what does it mean to be femme and sort of standing in that. Um, and then when I went into the tank, I met these two guides, Kantu and his wife, Katu and his wife, which was interesting because it was this direct embodying of feminine and masculine. And even in the tank, I was speaking out loud in two different accents. Um, it
Oh,
was
cool.
it was wild to be outside of myself, hearing these two different voices that I've never used before, and like Katu's wife, whose name is not supposed to be revealed to me yet, like that was very clear, but she was like very welcoming. And she was speaking for Katu, and then Katu was talking for his wife. It was like this mixture. And then the next day, I was reading my human design for the week, and it said this embracing of masculine and feminine. I just started cracking up.
That's
How
perfect.
funny.
I think that's it right there. Just let's do that. The fluidity of sexuality.
Yeah,
Fluidity of divine feminine and masculine. Yeah. Let's do
Perfect.
that.
yeah,
Here we go.
yeah. And I think what's interesting, because my partner and I have had conversations about like gender identity and sexuality and how it's like a really loaded topic, like what are the spaces that we hold for folks who are feminine and masculine and non-binary. And we were talking about like black lesbians and femmes like wanting safe space to sort of be themselves, and is that like not inclusive of people who are non-binary, and this ability that we should be able to hold these multiple things, people who identify just with the feminine or just with the masculine or with both.
Absolutely.
And I think our society has been so colonized by Europe, that wanted to put us into these binaries on purpose as a way to manage. And I was doing some homework, just I call it homework, but I guess it's just study about like gender fluid identities and spirituality, in Black and Brown cultures. And there's a lot,
Yeah.
like two spirit, a two-spirit identity and Native and Indigenous folks here in the United States. And I think there's Mahu and Hawaii
Yeah.
is the fluid one.
Absolutely.
And like Mali and Africa has Dogon, which is, I think I'm saying that right, which is also sort of this non-binary embodiment. And so I think it's interesting that we
Definitely is.
that we hold these things inside of us and not being afraid.
We were raised by my aunts who are lesbians for like past 30 years.
Uh-huh.
And we know one of my aunts as the boy, right? She dresses like the boy. And then we know my other aunt as the femme, right? But I was like, I think it's different now. Like, right? We were, us kids in our age now, in our 30s, we're like, it's different. Like, we're all the same.
Welcome to Motherland. Today we're talking about a bunch of things. I think it's a little, I think we're talking about a whole range of things on the spectrum, which I think is kind of appropriate as it relates to sexuality and spirituality. And for everyone, my pronouns are on our Zoom here, but my pronouns that I use are she and her. But actually, I've been saying lately too, because I know that for folks, it's who have various gender identities, it can be affirming or holding space when people say what their pronouns are. And I don't really care how people refer to me, I think, to be honest with you. Like, I think if somebody referred to me as he, I don't know if I'd be like, oh, I'm a she, so don't say that. So I think I identify as queer. And for me, I'll say what I think queer is. It's I don't consider myself a lesbian. I don't consider myself straight. Um, Maybe pansexual could be a term. I think I called myself bisexual for a really long time because I didn't really have any other language. So I appreciate the youth of today being able to come up with new language that feels comfortable for me to hold. Um, and I think as it relates to my spirituality, I actually, you know what? I do have more to say about this topic because last summer I was asked specifically to for an interview to talk about how does my queerness inform my spirituality, or does my spirituality inform my queerness? So maybe I do have a little bit more to say about
That's
this.
a great question.
Isn't that a fantastic question? And I remember when I read that question, because it wasn't an in-person interview. It was for a journal called Tarka, which is put out by Embodied Philosophy. And I was like, whoa, this is really a really powerful question. And I took a lot of time to think about it. And I think the answer that I said then and that I think I still hold now is that I think my identity informs my spirituality because in so many places I didn't feel safe.
Yes.
And spirituality was a place where I felt safe, and feeling connected to the earth and my ancestors. I felt held in my wholeness. So that's how I think sort of my queerness informed my spirituality. But I also think spirituality impacted my queerness because there were places where, as I was discovering yoga and mindfulness and other contemplative practices, and contemplative practices are practices where you sit with yourself and reflect. So think Buddhism, think, mindfulness, those kinds of things, yoga. In spaces, I didn't always feel safe. So there was a barrier that kind of went up in protecting myself, which is sort of the antithetical of my spirituality, because I'm putting up a wall, so I'm getting further away from myself.
Right.
So it goes back and forth. Like, I need to use my spirituality to hold myself, and then also use that same sort of holding when I'm in spaces that may not be friendly or safe.
Yeah. Ooh, that's such a good point. Because I definitely use my spirituality as a shield too, almost, and it helps me to process, I would say. Because to me, spirituality is oneness, but we're always talking on this podcast. We're talking about how a lot of people use that to bypass too. It's just there's just such a thin line. And again, when I was on vacation this week with my family, they go, "You know who'd be a good lesbian? Mel, because she's masculine." And I was just like, "Oh my god! Like, we need to sit and chit chat about defining these fucking terms, like in a funny way."
Yeah,
like, the old school generation was saying that, like the 50s and 60s year olds. God, Oneika, you're not old school, but I'm looking at my mom. She's 65, and they're like, "Man, why don't you just get with a girl? Because I'm single right now." I'm like, I don't think sexuality has to do with the way I act, and I'm different in their eyes. Does that make sense? And I'm just like, this is such an interesting thing to look at. So it's funny how this came up this morning.
I think I think it was what Oneika was saying before we started recording is, and I think it's a thing that, like we were saying, sexuality or identity and sexuality no longer has to be defined as we're exactly on, male or we're exactly female. And I think the thing is, right, is that there's such a beautiful blending that's occurring in it. And there's a safety in it nowadays. I mean, I think it was you were either one or the other.
Yes.
And, I'm sitting here listening because I have 4 teenagers. And so, watching them define sexuality these days is so different from our definition. I mean, it's, I remember, like, you counted on your hand how many people were, queer or cool. And now it's like, throw away your hands. There's not enough.
Yeah.
I'm listening to you and I'm loving this topic right now more than I know. We always are like, I don't have anything to say, but I'm like, oh my God, I'm learning so much already, because one of the things I have to be honest is one of the things everybody's bi, like everybody in high school, there's so many people that are bi. And sometimes I'm like, are you really bi? Are you bi because you're trending? Are you bi because like, where is the standpoint? But listening to you guys, I'm thinking right now, Spirit's like talking to me like, does it really matter?
Right.
No, it doesn't, because they're safe enough to express and figure out what it is they're in a safe space that we were not in. We were in, like you're saying, Mel, like we had a talk this Easter as well. I was walking and I'm like, I'm very masculine.
I have a lot of masculine energy too. The three of us do.
Yeah. And I've had to work hard on like embracing my feminine, but even in my personality and the way that I walk, like I walk in a very masculine way. And if you knew me, I don't know, Mal, if you knew me back, you didn't know me a couple years ago, my hair was like, I've always like super short hair. I mean, I'm talking pixie cut short hair.
Yeah, you can rock it too.
So, and I was always very like, I think I know where I balance in between that line of, I think it's super sexy when a woman can embrace masculinity, when you're like, damn,
me too,
freaking hot as hell. I'm completely in my feelings, but that is all good because
totally.
Yeah. No. Or I think it's also very cool when a guy embraces his femininity, where it's like, you are absolutely stunning and beautiful. I can stare at you.
Yay. Prince.
Yes, Prince.
Prince. Oh, Prince is
David Bowie.
Yes.
David Bowie.
David Bowie. Yeah.
Freddie Mercury. I mean,
oh yes.
Basquiat. I mean, the list goes on. And I think what's beautiful too is that, Mel, you said something that brought a memory back hardcore about when somebody said that you're really masculine. I remember, I was saying my previous life, sort of before I started living this life. Yes. I think I went out on a date with some guy. I know I went out on a date with some guy. I don't even remember who it is, which speaks out. So we all have a past.
Well, anyway, we had fun.
Anyway, so random dude was very intimidated because of what I did for a living, and I made a lot more money than him.
Yep.
And instead of just being able to admit his insecurity, it was to take digs at me and to say that I was really masculine, and why was I acting like such a man? And I was like, well, because I have a lot of money, like, fuck you,
Yeah.
But I remember talking to, that whole date fizzled. I really wish I could remember who it was. But anyway, I remember talking to a coworker about it when we were in Vegas for a conference. And he said, I think that's such bullshit. Because he said, I actually see you as the ultimate female. And what do you mean by that? This is like 15 years ago. And he said, there's lots of women who are so female. It's almost like they embrace the entire spectrum of what femininity is. It's power. It's, it's grace. It's sexiness. It's all of this stuff. And I was like, whoa, like I had never even thought of it like that. And I think it's interesting that we put these labels of, well, this is masculine and this is feminine. And really instead, like what Isabel was saying, like allowing things to be on this spectrum and, just calling it that, like, it's just a spectrum. And I think it is also too important for people to want to say, this is my masculine side, or this is my feminine side, or my sun side, or my lunar side, and whatever people call it, that we honor it for them. That's what I think the big thing is. Like allowing people to, like, whatever you say your thing is, I will say that to you, and I'm not going to make you fit into what I embody. Because that's where I think you get into problems. Like people want to call themselves feminine or embody that. And then we're like, well, no, there's a spectrum. Well, if that person says that, I'll honor that for them. And if you say that you embody both, then I'll honor that for you. Or you say you don't embody any of it, then I honor that for you too. That's where I think, that's where I think spirituality comes in, right? This ability to be less connected to what's happening inside our meat suit and more open to connecting to the idea of the divine and saying like, yes, I can honor everything because this body's going to be a corpse sooner or later. So none of this shit really fucking matters.
That was spot on. Exactly what I feel inside and can never articulate ever. And then it goes back to the energy of like, then there's some people, including myself, that used their masculine to almost shield up because of all the healing that still needs to happen. Right? Like people go, oh, do you come from a lineage of really strong women? I'm like, yeah, but like I think it's because the men in our life hurt us, right? Either abused us, and it's like, oh, damn, how. And as I've gotten older and really grounded in my personality and my body now in my late 30s, I'm like, I can be more feminine. So it's just interesting to see play out in different generations too. You and I, Oneika and I, are over 10 years apart. Like I'm sure our viewpoints are completely different with this, like the way we just see things. Because you grew up in a time where, damn, this shit was not acceptable.
It was not okay. It was, it wasn't even okay just to be a lesbian, like let alone sort of saying both, which is why like too, even when I said I was bisexual, I used to get so angry when people were like, oh, you're just greedy or you're confused or you can't make up your mind or, you know, all of those things are really hurtful. Or when, you know, I think I mentioned to you both like not too long ago when somebody says like, oh, I don't even think of you as being gay. And I'm like,
what does that mean?
Well, what is that even mean?
Yeah, I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah, like, you know, yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of people have these hangups and use spirituality either as a way to dig in to what those hangups are and say like, no, my spirituality says this. And also allowing room for us to look at maybe the way that spirituality was in some aspects that it was harmful, and can we allow it to gently evolve with the times and where we are now, and still honoring its roots. So I think it's honestly, I think it's a fluid conversation. But even beyond all this like gender stuff, like what do you guys think about like energy exchange? Like let's even just talk about sex, right? Like and like energy exchange I think is incredibly important too, when we're talking about sexuality and sexual energy. And being careful with that, because I'll be honest with you, I used to throw away my sexual energy and I didn't have any respect for it. And I think it's because of sexual trauma that I had in the past. And I didn't honor it for a really long time.
Yeah.
I think it has to go with like what we were saying earlier before this is like, and I just thought about this. How could you honor your sexuality, or not your sexuality, but your energy exchange, excuse my wording, but how can you honor energy exchange of sex, which I don't know how you were brought up, but when you were brought up that sex was not honorable, sex was dirty, sex was, you know, we don't embrace it, sex is a no-no unless you're married, or sex is this way. It's like you weren't really taught to honor sex and the beauty of sex for what it is. We were taught to hide sex, and because you were hiding it, or in some way it was shameful, right? Like that's the way that I look at it, as you know, in the energy exchange of things. So even though like I think we all have made some poor choices, I mean maybe just me, but when it comes to
no, raising my hand real high over here.
When it comes to the energy exchanges, but I think it's based on the fact that we didn't understand that connection. You know, I think one of the things last year, I don't care, like my kids are older now, one's 19 and one's 18, my two oldest, and is teaching them that now, the understanding of what you are sharing in sex, that it's not just, yes, you got to protect yourself from STDs. Yes, you got to do everything, but here's what I want you to understand what actually happens when you exchange energy with somebody. You know, be hella picky. Don't just, you know, it's don't give the goodies away for, you know, to everybody, but not because of that, but because be picky. Like really, because you are tying in energetically with somebody. Somebody's literally tying in with you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up in the 70s, because I think I'm 10 years older than both of you. And so in the 70s, the big book was Our Bodies Ourselves. It was like the book of the 70s, about feminism and sexuality. And it was like groundbreaking for its time because it talked about sex. It showed pictures of,
like sexual boobs,
vaginas and the clitoris. It talked about orgasm and like all of this stuff that had never been done before. And at the same time, this book called The Joy of Sex also came out as well, which was an illustrated manual of sex and what it could be like. And it was all heteronormative, right? Like although Our Bodies Ourselves, I think, did talk a little bit about homosexuality. But my mom had both of those books. And she actually gave me this book called Girls and Sex. It was like a little red paperback book that even talked about like masturbation. And we didn't talk about the book. She kind of just gave it to me to read.
Slide it in. There you are.
Yeah, because honestly, I did not grow up in a sexually progressive house.
Right.
And it's funny because it felt contradictory because that book was there in the house and my mom read it. And she gave me this book that seemed really like liberatory. And yet the environment that I was in was not that. So it was like, yes, read this book on masturbation. And maybe if you do, I just don't want to know about it kind of thing.
Yeah. Like one of those.
But I do think that once I realized my own energy and that when I was sleeping with somebody, that when I was having sex with somebody, that I was giving that away and tying in with them, it became more valuable. And you really understood, like, shit, your energy is going to be on them and they take that with them when they go. So are you sure you want that energy in you and you want your energy in them? Because you might be creating some soul contract with some MF that, it may not be so easy to get out of if you're not careful.
Yeah, that right there.
I paid the price for that
right there.
I have paid the price for that and have had to do a lot of cord cutting.
Girl, we all did. We all have. I was married for 17 years with somebody for 20. Like we all have.
I just discovered that like a year ago. Like it like finally sunk into my body. Like I can't sleep with him. My vibration is different than his, and I can't take that shit on. Especially when the foundation of our relationship was we're just gonna have sex. Right? I was just like, ooh, yeah, so tempting. You're so hot, but yeah, you have a lot of trauma I can feel, and I don't want any of that. Now I'm starting to understand this topic more. I was like, how am I gonna tie this in? Like, because I was thinking identity with like psychic identity, and I'm like, how does that make sense? But now I see what you're saying in the senses of the power aspect, right?
Yeah,
you, Mel.
And also,
sorry,
no, and also just I think that sex can be a transcendent spiritual experience.
Absolutely.
And I don't just mean because you're having a whole bunch of orgasms, but like which is nice. Just saying.
But like emotionally, right?
But emotionally, right? And spiritual, and that when an orgasm can be actually a spiritual experience, and not just because your toes curl, but because there's this connection where you are really leaving your bodies and connecting someplace else on another plane.
Yeah, I wanted Mel to cover a little bit on Mel, can you explain a little bit about for those what a sexual exchange is? So if people are like, what are they talking about? How is this working?
Like energetic exchange. I mean, it is what it sounds like. So like if you have sex with someone, you're taking on all of their issues too, their emotional bodies, their energetic bodies, their trauma, right? It's like a plug or a little charger to a cell phone, right? It's just like, yo, if you guys go like this, you're going to take on some of their stuff, right? And what we meant by cord cutting is when you want to release yourself from that relationship or non-relationship. It takes a lot to do that because you got to untangle emotions, and attachment. So I think this is what I would assume as we get older and we're like, we need to settle down more, right? Versus the one night stands in the 20s, right? When you're in your 20s, it's because we're aware of that. We're like, damn, I can feel this trauma on me. It's not even mine. So I think that's how I see it. I'm sure everyone's sexual lives are different, but for me, even, and it has nothing to do with sex these days. I can even just be in a room, like 3 days on vacation with my family, right? The first day was so chill because it was just my sister and the kids, and then more cousins came, and then more aunts came. And the third day, I was spent. I was like hiding in my room because I was like, the energy's too strong here for me. More too many, and just too many different frequencies. And I was like throwing back the drinks because I was just trying to mask the energy, to be honest. So I was like, oof. So energy exchange in general for me is just a hug at this point. Damn. And I'm 39? I'm like, fuck. Like in my head, I'm so sensitive. With both of you, as you guys got older, did you guys get more and more sensitive to that too?
Yeah.
Like the energy exchange?
Yeah. I'm very
Or are you guys more smart and more
selective of who you choose to surround yourself with? Like that's it at the end of the day. It's like I'm very selective on who I choose to surround, right? I mean, when I was young, I mean, I was always on the go. I want people around me all the time. I had to have this energy all the time around me. And now I'm more selective of just my space and who I am in my bubble. I like it. I'm comfortable and I'm good. I don't need 25,000 friends. You know, I can have my couple and that's it. And yeah, I'm definitely.
Yeah. See, I'm the single one out of the three. And it, for me, with this mindset, it's been really hard for me to meet people on a romantic level because I'm so buried up with my energy. And I'm like, oh, do I let you in? Do I not? I don't, I'm confused. There's no manual on this shit, right? The more sensitive you get, it's like, how do I let someone in? Do you guys have any advice for me, just in general?
Well, yeah, I think I do. Because I think I'm thinking, that's the pause.
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking about how I want to phrase this. I don't think that it means, you know, if you're single that you can't have sex and I'm going to go out, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't even think it's a bad idea if you want to have a one night stand, or if having sex with different partners is your thing. Because what I think we're talking about, the three of us are talking about here, maybe we haven't said it plainly. It's not just knowing that you're having it's knowing that you're having an energetic exchange. It's when you are completely unaware of what you are doing that it becomes problematic. But if you know that, you know, you're a person who wants to engage and, you know, a sexual exchange with somebody or a romantic exchange with somebody, and you know what you're doing, and you can prepare yourself for that exchange and take care of yourself after the exchange, then like, hey, go with God and, you know,
absolutely
what you want, because I think that's totally okay. And I think I think I started to really recognize that. I would say mid to late 30s, that I was interested in exploring certain things, like, you know, even things that, you know, would make people clutch their pearls, like, you know, and exploring, like, you know, some even BDSM stuff. But I went into, I know, right? Like, you know, I'm totally fine talking about it too. Like, it's just, I knew what I was doing. Like, I wanted to like even exchange that power energy, and it was actually even a way for me to explore as a Black woman, power and energy exchange in this dominant culture. Like, really sort of getting academic here. Like, what is it like to allow yourself to be tied up and exchange energy with the narrative of what that means and what it could mean, and what am I shedding when I allow myself to do that? If I allow myself to be tied up, am I letting go of some ancestral wound of being, you know? And I started to knowingly do that and explore it. So it was really liberating. I had done stuff like that in the past and wasn't liberated, and it was a very terrible, harmful, wounding experience. So I think when you're out there, knowing who you are and taking care of yourself as you go into certain experiences and exit certain experiences, it's like you can really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm here for it. Thanks for that.
I think
I'm like, I need to experiment more in this day and age, because my 20s, so very sexual and did so many things, but I'm like, I'm such a different person now. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. I think sex is and can be very empowering. It's a very empowering state. It all depends on your mindset. Like, it's like, where are you at, right? We can also use sex to mask and to hide. So that's a whole different mindset. But if you're in a space that you're doing your work and you're healing or whatever, I mean, it can be a very beautiful exchange and very empowering. And like Oneika said, if you guys are on equal forms of I want to explore and you want to explore and the consent's there, then by all means, like, have freaking fun with it, because it can be a great experience as well. But, you know, like you said, Mel, you have great intuition. You know if something's off and you're like, no, I ain't vibing with this. Like, I'm not vibing with it at the end of the day. And it's like, all right, cool. Like, that's it. But at the same time, I don't think you have to be like, wait, should I feel guilty or bad if I'm just exchanging this on a temporary basis, because this is where we're at right now in the moment, right? No different from any other time when we're in any spiritual conversation or intuition that we're sharing things. Same thing, right? In the moment.
I'll tell you guys something. I was
I'm like,
grab your popcorn. No, I'm kidding. It's not like that. I had a reading several months ago with someone, an ancestral reading, and was talking to somebody, channeled an ancestor from my paternal line. And there was a moment when the person was reading and said, okay, I'm going to say something that they're saying, and this is going to sound really weird, but I'm just going to say it out loud. And I was like, what? Yeah, just go ahead. And they're saying, like, she's saying that it's really okay, the things that you want to do sexually, like, you don't have to think about it, or, you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I just started cracking up because there had been sort of a conversation in my head at the time. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is really funny, because I was like legit actually thinking
about that.
Yeah. But, you know, done right, you know, sex can be like, you can be casting spells with sex, and that's why it's important to know, because you could be casting spells inadvertently.
Yeah. Isabel, tell them how you got Will.
With my vagina? I am not lying. I was like, this is the best sex you will ever have. Like, in my mind during, like, I was like, this is the best vagina ever. Lock that shit in.
Through that power of
like literally going through my head during intercourse.
Lined in gold, baby. It's lined in gold.
Because this guy did not want a relationship. He's like, I'm scared. And she's like, I'm going to get you. And it's true. The power of the P is big. That should be a book. I'm sure there's many, actually. Or the power of vitamin D as well. So, I mean, I love this topic now. It's like, oh, no. But going back to the very, very beginning, when I was talking about my family, and I was like, they're like, is Jalen the boy or the girl, right? And his relationship with his boyfriend. How does that make you feel, Oneika? Like,
I get really annoyed by that kind of thing, because actually, I had a relative who said something similar about that, about another relative in their relationship, and I was just really annoyed. I'm like, that's not a thing. Like, can we break that down? Can we actually unpack that for a second? Like, you're operating in this binary thinking, and really trying to place your heteronormativity on top of a relation, placing it right on top of a relationship, saying like, well, I only think of things as male and female, so that's the only way I can think of it. So I need to put that onto you, and because that's the only way that I can process this in my head, rather than just understanding there's kind of just two people here who are in this relationship, and there doesn't need to be this definition of who is what, and that there's just people. And so, yeah, I got annoyed. And it's not to say that there aren't people who engage in purposely embodying what they consider to be masculine. Like women
Right.
who purposely embody masculinity and call themselves mask of center because that's who they are and that's what they're embodying. And I think if we can have conversations, I think our ability to have conversations about that is really important, because what are we saying by masculine? Are we embodying the toxic aspect of masculinity? Because I've seen that with some women that I've dated too, and I'm like, yeah, you took all the bad shit as well, and so that all of those things become really, really important. But I think the biggest thing is that, can we have conversations about them in an open forum?
I think that masculinity is definitely on the verge of being reinstated as far as like how we're defining it. Like redefined. Thank you. Like we're redefining it like this day and age currently, because I think what you said right now is that our definition of masculinity was toxicity. Like that's what we knew, right? Not just, and I mean that by the sense, like, I think there's some beautiful qualities in masculine energy. I don't want to discount that, because like I said, I'm super masculine. And I think there's some really beautiful qualities in it, but it doesn't need to be a certain energy, right? Where I think you can be just as masculine, meaning strong, or, having this warrior type spirit in a way, but still want to put some makeup on your face or fix your eyebrows or, have this way of. And I think that's where we're learning as a culture to just redefine what that looks like. We've known what femininity is forever, right? But what is masculinity, and how does that look like outside of the context of our outside appearance, or, the way it is, but inside of us? And I'm just thinking, I have 2 boys and 2 girls, so it's been very interesting to watch them grow up and learn how to define it. I have, so one of the things is I have a son. He's the oldest right now. He's 19. I remember when he was about 10 or 11. I don't remember. I had a friend come over every week, or not every week, but every month, to cut my hair. Right. My friend is very feminine. His pronouns, he's very, very feminine. He's beautiful. He's a beautiful guy. Yeah. Like, that's all I can say. And he came over to do my hair. And so one day my son was like, "Mommy's really pretty. Like I have questions about," like, he wasn't questioning his sexuality. He was asking, like, "Can you explain to me what's happening?" And I was like, "Well, he's gay." And so my son's 10, and he's like, "What's gay mean? Like, I don't know what that means." And I'm like, "Well, he likes to be with boys. Like, you like girls, he likes boys." And he's like, "Oh." So I had to go down the journey, of course, of like, we don't hate for this. Like,
yes.
Like, and he's like, and he was sitting in the car, we're driving, we're having this conversation. And I'm like, everybody has the right to like who they have, and it makes them no different as a human. He's like, "Yeah," he's looking out the car window, and he's like, "I wouldn't hate you if you like trucks and I like cars."
I love kids.
Like, exactly.
That's it, kid. Oh my gosh.
I say that in, like, even watching my teens grow up, and now, the older boys trying to figure, like, okay, what is it, right? And then my girls, who are completely opposite of their mindset around sexuality. One is very fluid, and one is very like, I'm only in my box. And I'm like, well, this one can be very fluid. That's her. She's safe in that. And Anyway.
So I think another important element here that we haven't talked about, but we've sort of implied, is that when we're also talking about sexuality, I think we can't have this conversation without talking about power. And I think power is an important piece. And I'm mentioning this because A, I think it's an important thing to talk about, but B, I also did this beta test. A friend of mine created this unbelievable leadership program. It's called Wayfinding. And I did a beta test with about power. And power is defined as simply energy. Like, we put our own stuff, right, of dominant culture onto the word power. But when you just think of power as energy running through our body, like, being powerful can really be a beautiful thing. But when we add the toxic elements of what we think power is, that's when it becomes really dangerous. And I think we've had toxic, or she refers to it as shadow power, like sort of put onto men, right? So shadow power is defined as power that takes us out of our generative place, where we're able to sort of stand as a whole in ourselves. So shadow power and I hope I'm doing this justice, either is like can make us shrink and get really small, or our shadow power can dominate and be really big and make other people feel smaller, cause harm. And I think that gets wrapped up into sexuality as well, and even spirituality, right? When we start talking about guru culture. So being able to understand your own power and own it and deal with it and deal with your shadow power. Am I embodying shadow power right now with this person, or as a part of culture? And how can I like heal from that is also incredibly important. And I think that, you know, and I thought of that when Isabel was talking about this redefinition of masculinity. I think what we're talking about is a lot of the shadow power that's been put on to so many men, you know, and harm them. So they haven't been able to themselves in ways that could be so nurturing and healing for them. I feel so bad for so many little boys who are told that they have to like man up or they can't cry. Like it breaks my heart because you see them wanting to express themselves and the shadow power of society saying like, no, you're not allowed to be like that.
You have just made sense of what Spirit told me in January of this year. Because I was so literal with it. And they said, Mel, we are in 2 seasons this year, the feminine and the masculine. I'm like, all right, cool. So from January to June, stay in our feminine, allow us to clear the space and understand what we want, receive, and then go after it in June all the way to the end of this year. And now you're making it more sense for me in the sense of it's the healers. Maybe the message was, since you guys are healing the feminine now and it's taking a power stance, go help the men. And I've been getting this weird hit like, Mel, you work with 99.9% female. What are you doing with the men out there? I'm like, they can find a male therapist, right? Like that was my answer.
You remember, Mel, I told you I don't remember if I told you, but a couple months ago,
I do.
So many of my clients are men right now. Like, and I'm talking men doing shadow work. They're not just like, let me get a reading. They're like, we want the coaching. And I'm
they
like,
want to go inward.
and I have a thing too, where I've had to like learn how to be with like, where's my comfortability with it? I get really nervous before I work with a man, but once I'm working with them, I'm like, they're no different. We're just flowing. But I've had a lot of men, same thing, wanting to do the work, wanting to learn. And it's the same exactly what you're saying, Oneika, as like they had this shadow where it's like, we got to bust through it. We got to rethink things. You have to look at things in a different way from like what you have been taught and what you have taken on. And it's okay if you don't define it in the way that you were taught to define it. It's okay. Like you are safe to explore. You are safe to, you know, look at that. You're safe to cry. You're safe to have these feelings and emotions and honor it in whatever it was. Right. That's
it. That phrase, it's okay to cry. Ooh, for a man. Oof. I'm sure if I said that to any guy around me, they would like fall into my lap. You know, it's just like, that must suck for them. And when I think about the binary energy, like male versus female, it's all from religious standpoint. Like,
right? That's because you think of the yin yang symbol, like it's yin yang, and then a piece of each inside.
Yep.
I think the thing is that we were never, you know, I mean, I think it's religious toxicity. I don't think all religion is bad, but I think in some sense, you know, our religion has been used for control in the way that control was, let's divine it by male and female in these aspects, where if you really understand the way that we were created wasn't in the aspect of a male or female. Yes, we may present a certain way, but however, the way that we actually embody our spirit and our soul, it's not meant to be one or the other. We're actually like female and everything. We're meant to be both. And I think Oneika covered it before we were recording, in the fact that so many cultures do that. Like they've done that for years, right? You know, Native American culture, which I'm familiar with, is the two-spirit. Like the two-spirit is somebody that was so honored, so honored in the community. It wasn't like, oh, stay away. It was like, no, they're beautiful individuals that are honored in this space. And so
South Asian culture has it, you know. Hawaiian culture. I think it's Mahu. Am I saying that right?
Mahu. Yeah,
is it Mahu?
Exactly
right.
Yeah, we love our Mahus.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I had mentioned, you know, Dogon and Mali culture and Africa. colonization really did a
It
number
fucked us
on the
up.
entire world, not even just like everywhere, just spreading their nonsense everywhere.
Right.
Meanwhile, these Europeans loved the wigs and makeup. If you really looked at it,
Hello.
I'm dead.
they did, didn't they? These
Yes.
men loved it. So it's
Loved
like,
it.
Isn't that funny though?
it.
they defined, if you ever study the Renaissance fashion period, the men actually defined the fashion for the time. It wasn't the women. The women were following suit from the men. So it's like, I got some questions. Like, we got some questions. So yeah.
I love that you just brought that shit up. Like,
It's true. It's true. I just love the fact that we can even have this conversation. I think it's just with 3 BIPOC women having these, you know, these different experiences too, is just, it's really powerful. And I'm glad that we're able to talk about it in a way that's free and we can have different views, and I just think it's really beautiful and necessary.
Yeah, I have a question, and maybe you guys can answer. And I'm coming from my perspective of, you know, I'll be 42 this year. I was primarily raised by my grandfather. So very different, strong Hispanic mindset and masculine, machismo male. And I look at the sense of, my mother didn't have a mom. So her mom passed when my mom was really young. So my mother and her sisters are very masculine. They're very, very masculine because they were raised by my grandfather. How would you tell somebody, and how do you allow yourself to learn to be fluid, also to learn to embrace their sexuality when everything in their line has taught them otherwise, right? So like for me, being 41, I don't think I really started to look at my sexuality or know who I was until late in my 30s. I followed suit. I mean, I met my ex-husband when I was 17 turning 18, and I was with him for 20 years. Like, I didn't really, and then, you know, towards my divorce, I just jumped into another relationship, which I thought we were going to have, you know, taste the rainbow, but we did not.
like, oops, it's over. The rainbow's over.
Rainbow's only one color. That's okay. Never mind. I'm hearing his voice in my head, and I'm like, I'm not going to say that. But my thing is how would you tell somebody, like, how does someone go about this that maybe is like, how do I do this because I've always taught this? Any advice?
That's the number one question.
I think it starts with gentleness and tenderness, because first it's like you have to be able to hold every part of yourself, and that means holding the part of yourself that may have been nurtured in a way that doesn't feel completely healthy anymore, and being okay and acknowledging that. I'm not saying being okay with it, but acknowledging that, and not like, oh, that was terrible, that was wrong, because it was what it was. You know what I mean? Our ancestors dealt with, and even our recent ancestors dealt with what they had to. So they did the best that they could, you know? And so acknowledging that, and then allowing yourself to just maybe gently ask questions about who you are, what makes you feel good. And by feel good, I mean safe and healthy and whole and complete. Because if you ask me what I thought felt good, you know, when I was 22, I'd be giving you a different answer than what I'm giving you now. And so I think that it becomes this journey where you're evolving, but it comes from a place of wholeness and tenderness, and really letting go and acknowledging shame that can exist.
One of the words you just said is allowing yourself to evolve. And I love that, because the fact is, right, I always tell people we're constantly evolving spiritually, meaning like even now as a psychic and a person with your abilities, my abilities always are shifting. They're always evolving. They're changing, right? Like you had said, Oneika, you have new spirit guides. We're always changing, which doesn't make any difference from our sexuality, because sexuality and spirituality are of we're the same. Like it's the same energy. So you have to allow yourself to evolve. One of the questions though I have for you, Oneika, and I'm thinking of this while you're saying it. What is your thought process as a queer person with the word experiment when people are like, because I'm thinking when you say evolve, some people would think, well, does that give me the freedom to experiment? And what do you think about that as a queer person with people having the freedom to quote experiment?
With people. So I think, so I think with some context here, I think as we're figuring out who we are, experimentation is really natural. But I think being honest with yourself and with the partner that you're with becomes really important, and not using people as like a tourist, like straight people who, want to hook up with queer people, but don't want to sort of do the work of investigating who they are. But yeah, people explore it and experiment. Boys do it. People who are non-binary do it. You have to figure out who you are. So that means like you do different things. But I think when you start using people, that's a different thing, right? When experimentation comes at the expense of another person's energy or another person's like identity, that's a problem. Right? That's when you're causing harm. So being able to be honest about where you are in your journey is really important. And people get really traumatized. And so, there was a period when I didn't want to date some, a woman who was just discovering who she was, because there's all this baggage that comes with that. And that might have been unfair on my part. Like I could have been more open with that, but I like had a hard line with that because I was like, I'm not trying to deal with that nonsense.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. And I've evolved. I embodied a lot of homophobia as I was growing up. I mean, because of this, look where I am, and so I think it becomes important to allow people to evolve, because I'm not the person I am now because of who I used to be. I went through all of those things to stand in who I am now. And, I've said some terrible things and thought ways that were really harmful because I didn't know any better. And until I was allowed to be gentle with myself, that's when I learned to embrace different things.
It's all about just evolving and healing, really, then, within yourself.
Yeah, and being able to have community where you can feel safe to have these conversations, where you can be held, especially if your family, you're a family of origin, isn't something that they're willing to hold or embrace. That's when I think chosen family can become really important and really powerful. So you have these places to say these things.
Yeah. So this entire podcast, I've been getting a lot of like beautiful messages. And then I've had a few of my friends, like my white friends in particular, they're like, oh, is this like your time to bash us? I was like, no, I was like, you guys got to listen. This is just from our perspective. And as they're starting to, these topics are fire. And they're like, I'm really listening to you guys. And I see where you guys are going. I was like, yeah, the whole intention was just for you guys to hear our side almost, like our perspective. But we're not racist against white people, right? Like that's what a lot of people have been coming at, like close friends. I'm like, no. Sorry, I just had to blurt that in because this entire topic is so valuable. And I'm like, please listen. I think that's my message in general.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot just from listening to you guys. I mean, myself.
Yeah.
I think
it's really giving me a lot to think about as a parent, and then realizing some of my own sexual traumas and the way that I was. Because, Nika, your mom was so ahead of the time. Like, even though she didn't have that conversation, right? Here's a little masturbation book. Here you go. Like nobody told me anything about that. And I know this is like until I was in my 30s. Like literally in the 30s. I remember my mother made a comment like, you got to figure out how to please yourself in order to know how someone else pleases you. And I was like you do that? Like I'm allowed to do that? Like,
wow.
Like I was so late in the game. And in my 30s, 50 Shades of Grey had just come out. Like that was literally 50 Shades of Grey. Girl, we figured it out. We figured it out.
That girl figured that shit out.
We figured it out. But so
that's wow.
And I had to like over time, I mean, here I am married to the person. And let me tell you, okay, guys are going to be like tripping out, right? I met my ex, I was 17, 18. And yes, I totally had sex before we were, whatever. When we met, that's all we were doing. And then afterwards we got, I guess I'm going to use the word, we got saved, if you know what I mean. And we cut sex out for 2 years. We just were like, no sex.
Wow.
Like literally. So
did you do anything?
No. We
not,
kissed.
Oh, that's rough.
But like it wasn't like everything but
no oral sex,
nothing. And so then after coming back, Mel's like, this answers so many questions. So after coming back, literally the first time we had sex again was our wedding night after 2 years. And I remember
my eyes literally twitching right now.
Like, like in my body right now, even talking about this, I'm like tensed up because I'm like I remember like, I mean, that's traumatizing, you guys. Like that is so traumatizing to anyone that's ever saved themselves from it. That is so freaking traumatizing. And it wasn't the same. It just wasn't, the connection wasn't like, it was painful. If your body is in pain, trauma response, it was painful. I would cry. I would have to stop. Like it was so bad. So like I had to go through with trying to figure out like, what is this and what does it look like? And then by the end of my marriage, right, I was literally told like, don't stand naked, get your clothes on. Like, what are you doing? And so I was just like, okay, like, how do I feel safe and how do I do this? Anyways, I don't know what I was saying, but I got to find it really late and I had to really figure it out for myself. And
I'm glad you figured it out.
Thanks.
Me too.
4 kids later.
No, I say that really from my heart.
Yeah.
Like, really, I'm really glad because I think for a lot of women who haven't been able to explore that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've been masturbating since I was like 8. So
yeah, I'll figure it out.
But it can be really, it cuts you off from a part of yourself that's so incredibly important. I think the part that can also help spark that, like that inner fire that gives us power, that energy running through us so we can stand in ourselves. It's really important. And no matter how you embrace it, whether it's like, well, I don't want to have sex, but I understand my sexual power, or I do want to have sex all the time, and I understand my power, but just being able to own it and have agency with it because it's yours is really vital.
I'm so proud of our new generations. I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud of. There is times where I have to say, hey, like I forget when I was listening to my son's friends talk. This is the 16-year-old. And one of the kids was like, yeah, I'm going to tap that. And I'm like, boy, you ain't tapping anything but the wall behind you. Like, but I was like, so some of it can be a little bit too much, like where I'm like, bring it back in. I think I was talking to one friend of my daughter's the other day and he was like, Miss Isabel, like I totally, made out with this girl. And I was like, boy, like you need to stop giving your energy away. Like make that a prize. You are giving it away to like everybody. But still my point is like, they really are ahead of their time. They really are. And I know so many parents are really scared and worried about that. Like I think they are, because they're like, our kids are moving too fast or they're too this. And I say this because I have to be the mom in this podcast in a way, but it's like, if you have a child that is discovering their sexuality, I think the best thing that you do is you need to take your perspective out, whatever it may be, and allow them to just, be safe in talking to you and allow that. I mean, I look at the way I presented with my older ones when sex came, and it's just, they're ahead of it. It was such an easy conversation versus I remember my mom would be like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, I didn't want to talk about it. With them, I'm like, do we need to go to the doctor and get birth control? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That was it. End of conversation. Cool. Any questions? No, I'm good. Okay. Right on. Let's keep moving on. Like,
I mean, it's props to our generation because we're allowing them to talk.
Yeah.
Right. Because when people are like, damn, these kids are like so woke. I'm like, yeah, because we make them feel safe.
That's important too, right? Like being able to honor, generations before too. Like I think, sometimes we're, so quick to sort of shit on
like
the
you messed us
generation. Yeah, but also saying like, well, look what you had to deal with. Like I'm amazed you got it this far, you know?
Yeah.
And being able to sort of keep evolving, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ooh.
What a
So this
topic.
whole thing. Yeah, what a topic. Who
Yeah.
someone asked us this in Instagram Live. I can't remember who. Do you guys remember?
It was V.
Oh, got you. Yeah. Isabel's client. That was a good. You know what? She's a radio DJ too. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
She's
Thank
like,
you
let's
for
give
the
them a hard time.
suggestion. It was a great suggestion. And if you all have other suggestions or topics that you'd like us to chop up, we are here for it.
Yeah.
And we love
Because
your
it stumped
feedback.
us at first, right? We're like, huh. Like I was just sitting in silence for like 2 minutes. I'm like, I have no idea what angle I'm gonna go in from here.
I know.
That
I
makes
was like,
sense.
I know I wasn't feeling it either this morning. I was like, I don't know where I am with this conversation, but we'll see how this goes. But Nikki, you were on fire for it. You were ready. You were like,
okay.
I'm so ready for out of here.
Oneika gave us an in to swim. We're like, okay, we got it.
Anything you guys want to say, like at the end of it all, like anybody? Because I've learned a lot. That's it. I've learned a lot.
I am grateful to you both for the ability just to have open conversations and allowing each of us to have those times to sit back and listen or come forward and contribute.
Yeah.
I think that's what community is about, and that's how we decolonize. And I think that's important. I think especially for folks who are white passing or white who are listening, like this is a time sometimes that we just listen, and colonization has made it that people who are of dominant culture have to participate in conversations, and that there's not a value to listening, and listening is just as important of a skill as contributing.
Yeah.
Damn. You said it.
There is a powerful book. I know I gave you the recommendation, Oneika. I can't remember. It's upstairs right now. There's a powerful book that was written by a series of women in the late 70s. And all these women were, they were somewhere either bi or queer or whatever it is. And they were coming out about like speaking, right? So feminist. But what was beautiful about this book is you had the white feminists and then you had the BIPOC feminists. They weren't one of the same. So the book is and so they came together as a collective. It was the first time ever, and wrote a book, a series of poems and short stories about their expression of their sexuality and forming like, we are tired of fighting for our feminist rights over here and over here. Your stories are different than mine as somebody of color. Your perspective of your feminism is different. Oh, if you guys are, I don't care what your sexual origin.
I'm gonna find that, and maybe we can put that.
I have it upstairs. I mean, I'd have to run to go grab it really quick in like a second. But I don't care what it is, what you define yourself as. You will learn. You will learn, and I literally will like have read a short story and just. And like, I love learning. So I'm like, but like, if you're like, I don't know, how do I look at different perspectives? This book is a powerful way of looking at different perspectives.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I'll put it in the thing.
Okay.
I'll just put it down below, but it's an old book. It's hard to find, but it's a good one.
Awesome.
I love that.
Anyway.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Just to top it off, what Oneika said is like, when someone tells you who they are, it's like, respect them in that perspective. I try to respect it. Yeah. That's same thing with spirituality. It's like they can feel, see, hear, and know. It's like, respect them in that perspective. So this whole thing is all about listening, right? I don't know. I'm grateful for you guys. It's a Shadow Tuesday every Tuesday when we record.
It sure is.
It makes me look deeper in like, who am I really? Every time we start, honestly, we just keep digging and digging. The excavation period as a healer and talking about this, it's like, damn, I read a lot of people and it's like, I can get lost in everyone's story. So it's just interesting to reground into myself. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. All right. Bye.